Hey guys, tonight we're taking a journey back in time. Further back than any written records, any grand pyramids, or even the faint scratch of an ancient pen. We're going all the way to the Stone Age, to a time when humans lived intimately with the land, their survival dictated by the rhythms of nature. And our focus, as you drift off to sleep, will be on something wonderfully fundamental. Something that connects us across tens of thousands of years. Dinner. Imagine, if you will, the flickering warmth of a prehistoric campfire, the crackling of wood, the earthy scent of smoke, and the subtle aroma of something roasting over the flames. You're sitting on a rough animal hide, the chill of the evening seeping into the air, surrounded by your small family group. What exactly is on that plate? Or rather, what's on that leaf, or in that hollowed-out log? For a Stone Age family, every meal was a testament to ingenuity, collaboration, and sheer primal effort. And let me tell you, if you were a Stone Age human, you probably wouldn't survive a single day if you didn't know how to find, prepare, and share that dinner. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening, let me know where you are in the world and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see how far these sleepy stories travel. Now dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The term Stone Age covers an immense span of human history. Roughly from 3.4 million years ago to around 4,000 to 2,000 BCE. Depending on the region, that's a long time. To simplify things, when we talk about a Stone Age family dinner, we're generally thinking of the Paleolithic period, specifically the Upper Paleolithic, which is when Homo sapiens became the dominant human species and truly began to flourish across the globe. This was before agriculture, before permanent settlements, before pottery, and certainly before anyone had invented a microwave. Life in the Paleolithic was fundamentally different from our own. You weren't popping to the grocery store or ordering takeout. Every single calorie consumed had to be actively acquired from the environment through hunting, fishing, or gathering. This wasn't just a pastime. It was the primary occupation of daily life, an incessant, demanding quest for sustenance. Your very existence depended on your skill, knowledge, and cooperation with your small band of fellow humans. The dietary options of a Stone Age family were incredibly diverse, dictated entirely by their local environment and the seasons. They were supreme opportunists capable of exploiting a vast array of resources. Their diet was far from the simplistic meat and berries stereotype often portrayed in popular culture. In fact, it was probably far more varied than what many of us eat today. A mainstream historical fact is that early humans were omnivores, consuming a mix of animal protein from hunting and fishing and plant matter from gathering wild fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, and tubers. This flexibility was a key evolutionary advantage, allowing them to adapt to different environments and survive periods of scarcity. They weren't picky eaters. They couldn't afford to be. Imagine the typical day. The men might venture out on a hunt, perhaps tracking a herd of deer or stalking smaller game like rabbits or birds. They'd rely on their intimate knowledge of animal behavior, their skill with rudimentary tools like spears or otlot spear throwers, and their collective strength. Meanwhile, the women and children would typically be engaged in gathering, meticulously searching the landscape for edible plants. They knew which berries were safe, which roots were nourishing, and where to find seasonal nuts. This division of labor, though not rigid, is common and incredibly efficient. The food, once acquired, wasn't always consumed immediately or easily. Whatever was caught or gathered often had to be eaten relatively quickly or preserved using ingenious, albeit simple, methods. The challenge wasn't just finding food, but making it last. A quirky tidbit: some archaeological evidence suggests that Stone Age people in certain regions, particularly coastal areas, developed a surprising taste for shellfish. Middens, or ancient refuse heaps, have revealed vast quantities of discarded shells, indicating that clams, mussels, and oysters were a significant and reliable food source. Imagine a Stone Age clam bake, perhaps enjoyed on a sunny beach. The salty air and the taste of the ocean, a welcome change from forest foraging. It sounds rather relaxing, actually. The concept of a meal itself might have been different. While they certainly gathered to eat, especially after a successful hunt, food was likely consumed opportunistically throughout the day as it was acquired. There wasn't a strict breakfast, lunch, dinner schedule. You ate when there was food, and when it was safe. Historians still argue whether early humans had a preference for meat over plants, or vice versa, given the difficulty of accurately reconstructing the exact proportions of their diet. Evidence suggests a highly adaptable diet, with local resources being the primary determinant. What's clear is that every calorie was valued, every hunt was critical, and every gathered berry was a small victory against the constant specter of hunger. As you begin to drift, imagine the quiet efficiency of a Stone Age family working together under the vast, ancient sky, finding their sustenance in the wild embrace of nature, settling down by the fire for another hard-won dinner, building upon the foundational understanding of the Stone Age diet as a remarkably diverse mix of hunted and gathered resources. Let's now delve deeper into the sheer variety that graced the prehistoric plate. Far from a monotonous menu, the hunter-gatherer diet was an incredibly adaptable and extensive feast, dictated by geography, climate, and season. Imagine a world that was your entire grocery store, with no aisles, just vast, wild landscapes, demanding immense knowledge to navigate. For our Stone Age family, the menu was literally the entire ecosystem around them. Animal protein came from a staggering array of sources. Larger game might include woolly mammoths in colder climates, though hunting them was exceptionally dangerous and often opportunistic, targeting the sick or young. Bison, deer, wild horses, reindeer, elk, and wild boars. These provided not just meat, but also fat organs, which were often highly prized for their nutrient density, bone marrow, and hides for clothing and shelter. Hunting these animals required immense skill, courage, and cooperation within the group. It was less about a single hero and more about synchronized teamwork. Like a very intense, spear-based ballet, smaller game was a more reliable and frequent source of protein. Think rabbits, hares, birds, including their eggs, rodents like squirrels, and even insects. Yes, insects. While perhaps not appealing to many modern palates, insects were a readily available, nutrient-rich food source in many environments. Imagine carefully gathering beetle larvae or roasted grasshoppers as a crunchy snack. It was a protein-packed delicacy, albeit one that might make you squirm a little. Waterways provided another crucial food group: fish, shellfish, and aquatic birds. Archaeological sites along ancient coastlines and rivers often reveal large middens, ancient refuse heaps composed almost entirely of discarded shells and fish bones, indicating that these were staple foods in many regions. Fish could be caught using rudimentary nets woven from plant fibers, bone hooks, or even simple spears. Shellfish were easily collected from shallow waters or exposed tidal flats. A mainstream historical fact is that coastal and riverine Stone Age communities often had diets heavily reliant on aquatic resources, demonstrating early humans' adaptability to diverse ecosystems. On the plant side of the menu, the variety was even more astounding. Wild fruits like berries, raspberries, blackberries, wild grapes, wild apples, and plums provided sweetness and vitamins. Nuts such as acorns, hazelnuts, and chestnuts were excellent sources of fat and calories, though often required labor-intensive processing to remove toxins or tough shells. Seeds from wild grains and grasses could be ground into a rudimentary flour for flatbreads or porridges. Once the technology for milling developed, then there were the tubers and roots, often hidden underground, requiring digging sticks or other tools to unearth. Wild carrots, parsnips, wild yams, and various edible roots provided crucial carbohydrates and fiber. These underground edibles were particularly important during leaner seasons when above-ground plants were scarce. Discovering a patch of nutritious tubers was like hitting a small, earthy jackpot. A quirky tidbit that highlights their deep botanical knowledge. Early humans were incredibly adept at identifying not just edible plants, but also those that were poisonous or required specific processing to be rendered edible. They had an intimate, handed-down understanding of their botanical environment, which was literally a matter of life and death. Imagine having to know every single plant in your local park, which are delicious and which will make you violently ill just to survive. Fungi, like mushrooms, would also have been part of a diet, though discerning edible from poisonous varieties would have required considerable inherited knowledge and careful experimentation. And don't forget honey, a highly prized and energy-rich treat. Laboriously collect. A quirky tidbit: some archaeological findings suggest early humans might have used animal disguises or camouflage to get closer to their prey. Imagine hunters draped in animal skins, slowly approaching a herd of wild horses, blending into the landscape, mimicking their movements. This shows a remarkable level of cunning and observational skill, truly getting into the mind and body of their target. It's like a very, very slow motion, life or death game of dress-up. Hunting was not just about acquiring meat. It was also a central social activity fostering cohesion and cooperation within the group. The success of a hunt meant survival for everyone, reinforcing bonds and distributing roles. The anticipation, the danger, and the shared triumph of a successful kill would have been powerful, unifying experiences. Historians still argue about the relative importance of big game hunting versus small game hunting and foraging in the overall Paleolithic diet. While big game provided large, concentrated sources of calories and fat, they were also dangerous and infrequent. Smaller game and gathered plants likely provided a more consistent day-to-day food supply. The balance undoubtedly varied by region and specific environment. So, as you drift deeper into the quiet, imagine the prehistoric landscape, vast and untamed. Picture the silent determination of the hunters, their spears poised, their movements precise, working together as a single, focused unit. The thrill of the chase, the danger of the encounter, and the satisfaction of a successful hunt, these were the primal rhythms of survival, gently guiding you into a deep, primal slumber. The scent of wood smoke, the quiet rustle of leaves, the distant call of a wild animal, all part of the ancient world's lullaby, while the dramatic tales of big game hunting often capture our imagination. A much more consistent, reliable, and arguably more vital source of sustenance for the Stone Age family came from foraging, the plant-based bounty of the wild. Imagine a vast, sprawling natural garden teeming with edible treasures, but demanding immense knowledge and patience to harvest. This wasn't just a side activity. It was a daily, meticulous quest that sustained life even when the hunt yielded nothing. Foraging was primarily the domain of women and children, though everyone in the group would have contributed. This division of labor was incredibly efficient, ensuring a consistent food supply. While the men were out pursuing elusive animals, the women and children were steadily gathering the predictable, accessible calories that kept the group alive day to day. They were the original expert botanists and nutritionists, with an encyclopedic knowledge of their local flora. The variety of edible plants available to Stone Age foragers was astounding. Think of the readily available wild fruits, berries like raspberries, blueberries, and cranberries depending on the region, wild apples, plums, grapes, and figs. These provided vital vitamins, minerals, and natural sugars. A welcome sweetness in a diet often dominated by savory flavors. The ripening of these fruits would have been a cause for seasonal celebration and intense gathering. Then there were the nuts and seeds, acorns, hazelnuts, chestnuts, pine nuts, and various wild seeds from grasses and other plants provided crucial fats and carbohydrates. Many of these, like acorns, required specific processing to remove bitter tannins or hard shells, demonstrating sophisticated knowledge of food preparation even in early societies. Imagine painstakingly cracking dozens of nuts, knowing each one was a valuable calorie, perhaps less appealing to our modern palates, but incredibly important for their caloric content were tubers, roots, and bulbs. Wild carrots, parsnips, yams, and various starchy roots were dug from the ground using simple digging sticks. These underground stores were particularly valuable because they could often be found even in colder seasons or when other plants were scarce. Discovering a patch of nutritious roots was like striking a carbohydrate goldmine. Leaves, stems, and flowers from various wild plants also contributed to their diet. Many wild greens are highly nutritious, providing essential vitamins and minerals. Even mushrooms, though often tricky to identify as edible versus poisonous, would have been part of their diverse intake. A mainstream historical fact. The ability of early humans to exploit a wide range of plant resources demonstrates an incredibly sophisticated understanding of their environment, passed down through generations. This deep Ecological knowledge was not merely observational. It involved understanding seasonal availability, optimal harvesting techniques, and methods for detoxifying or processing certain plants to make them edible. It was a living library of botanical wisdom, constantly updated and shared. A quirky tidbit related to this plant knowledge. Archaeological evidence suggests that some Stone Age communities used portable grinding stones to process wild grains and seeds into a rudimentary flour. While not true bread as we know it, this flour could be mixed with water to create flatbreads or porridges. A significant step in diversifying their carbohydrate intake beyond roots and fruits. Imagine the satisfying crunch of grinding wild oats. Knowing you were making tomorrow's simple meal, foraging was a less risky activity than hunting big game. But it was still demanding. It required patience, keen observation, and often long hours of walking and searching. This intimate connection to the land meant that every plant, every berry, every root told a story of the season, the soil, and the potential for sustenance. Historians still argue about the precise nutritional balance between animal and plant foods in different Stone Age diets. While popular portrayals often emphasize meat, many scholars now believe that plant foods formed a substantial and often majority portion of their caloric intake, especially for groups living in diverse, resource-rich environments. The adaptability of the human digestive system to a wide variety of plant foods was a key factor in our species' global success. So, as you drift deeper into sleep, imagine the quiet diligence of a Stone Age family, moving through a verdant landscape, their eyes keenly searching, their hands carefully gathering. The earthy scent of roots, the sweet tang of wild berries, the rich aroma of nuts. These were the natural perfumes of their daily survival, provided by the generous wild pantry of the world. Let the gentle whispers of foraging knowledge lull you into a deep, nourishing slumber, free from the need to search for your next meal. The Stone Age diet, as we've explored, was incredibly diverse. But it was also profoundly dictated by the relentless rhythms of the natural world. For a Stone Age family, the concept of seasonal eating wasn't a trendy lifestyle choice. It was the very essence of survival, a constant dance with nature's ever-changing pantry. Imagine living a life where your entire food supply shifted dramatically with the turning of the seasons, demanding constant adaptation, foresight, and a deep, intuitive understanding of the environment around you. Spring would have brought a flush of new growth, tender shoots, young leaves, and the first wild greens, eager to burst forth after the lean months of winter. Small animals emerging from hibernation or newly born might also become more accessible. This was a time of renewal, of breaking the winter fast with fresh, vibrant flavors. It's like the joyous arrival of spring produce at a farmer's market, but on a grander, life-ordered scale. Summer, for many regions, was a period of relative abundance. This was the prime season for wild fruits and berries, bursting with sweetness and vital nutrients. Imagine collecting baskets of ripe raspberries, juicy wild plums, or sweet mulberries, enjoying them fresh from the bush. Fish might be more plentiful in warmer waters, and smaller game animals would be active. This was a time for feasting, for replenishing reserves, and for perhaps a bit of relaxed enjoyment after the earlier struggles. As autumn approached, the focus would shift dramatically towards nuts and seeds. Acorns, chestnuts, and hazelnuts would ripen, providing crucial sources of fat and carbohydrates for the coming colder months. This was a period of intense gathering and processing, preparing stores for the lean season. Migratory birds would be fatter, ready for their long journeys, making them attractive hunting targets. The land would offer a final, generous bounty before its winter slumber. Winter was, for many, the most challenging season. Above-ground plants would wither, and many animals would either hibernate or become more difficult to track in snow or harsh conditions. During these lean months, the Stone Age family would rely heavily on stored food, dried meats, preserved nuts and seeds, and on the hardy roots and tubers that could be dug from the frozen ground. Hunting would shift too. Larger, more enduring game, or whatever could be scavenged. It was a time of careful rationing, of huddling together for warmth, and of waiting patiently for the return of spring. A mainstream historical fact is that this strict reliance on seasonal availability meant that the Stone Age diet was incredibly varied over the course of a year, but also highly localized. A family living near a coast would have a very different seasonal menu than one in an inland forest or a mountainous region. Their diet was a direct reflection of their immediate ecological niche. This adaptability was a key factor in human survival across diverse global climates. A quirky tidbit that demonstrates their ingenuity in navigating seasonal scarcity. Some archaeological evidence suggests, after the arduous task of hunting and gathering, and the transformative process of cooking, a crucial challenge remained for the Stone Age family: food preservation. Imagine securing a large kill or finding an abundant patch of berries, knowing that without any modern refrigeration, this bounty could spoil quickly. The ingenuity of early humans in devising ways to store food for leaner times was paramount to their survival, allowing them to bridge periods of scarcity and ensuring sustenance when hunting or foraging was unproductive. It was ancient meal prep, but with much higher stakes and no handy plastic containers. The most fundamental and widespread. Method of food preservation in the Stone Age was drying. Imagine strips of meat, perhaps from a freshly cut deer or a large fish, meticulously cut and hung over smoky fires or laid out in the sun and wind. The heat and air would slowly draw out the moisture, creating a tough, chewy, and highly portable food source that could last for weeks, even months. This dried meat, often called jerky today, was a vital, high-protein, high-energy snack for nomadic groups or for surviving harsh winters. Fruits, berries, and even some roots could also be dried, offering a source of carbohydrates and vitamins. When fresh produce was unavailable, smoking was another effective method, particularly for meat and fish. Building on their mastery of fire, early humans would create smoky environments in shelters or pits, allowing the smoke to permeate and preserve the food. The smoke's compounds, along with the drying effect, inhibited bacterial growth and added a distinctive flavor. Imagine the rich, earthy scent of smoked salmon or cured game meat hanging in a prehistoric smokehouse, a promise of future meals. Manstream. Historical fact is that the development of effective food preservation techniques, like drying and smoking, was a critical factor in allowing early human groups to become more sedentary, or at least to survive in environments with pronounced seasonal variations in food availability. It reduced the constant, immediate pressure to find food and allowed for periods of rest and other activities. It was a leap in food security, transforming survival from day-to-day scrambling to strategic planning. Cold storage was employed naturally, where available. In colder climates, meat could be simply frozen solid, especially during winter months. In some regions, early humans might have discovered natural cold storage in caves or underground pits that maintained consistently low temperatures. Imagine a natural freezer where large portions of a mammoth or bison could be kept fresh for extended periods, for nuts and seeds. Storage in dry, cool places was essential. Underground pits lined with leaves or grasses could protect these valuable calorie sources from moisture and pests. Imagine carefully burying your stash of acorns, knowing they were safely waiting for the lean winter months. This required foresight and a good memory for where your hidden pantries were, a quirky tidbit that showcases their ingenuity. Some archaeological evidence suggests that Stone Age people in certain regions might have used natural fats to preserve meat by rendering animal fat and then encasing strips of dried meat in it. This created a highly calorie-dense, long-lasting food source, somewhat akin to pemmican, a traditional food developed by indigenous peoples of North America. It's like creating an ancient, nutrient-packed energy bar, specifically designed for harsh environments while the concept of salting, as we know it, would come much later with the development of sophisticated salt extraction. Early humans might have utilized naturally occurring salt deposits or brackish waters to some extent for very rudimentary preservation, or simply relied on the drying process more heavily. The challenges of food preservation were immense. Pests, mold, unexpected changes in weather, and competing scavengers were constant threats to stored provisions. This meant constant vigilance and the development of rudimentary storage solutions, like elevated platforms to protect food from ground-dwelling animals, or securely sealed pits. Historians still argue about the extent to which these preservation methods allowed for a long-term food security versus merely extending the shelf life of food for a few weeks or months. It's likely that while they provided crucial buffers against immediate hunger, sustained famine was still a very real and recurring threat, especially during prolonged environmental shifts. So, as you drift deeper into the quiet, imagine the resourceful Stone Age family diligently preparing their hard-won food, carefully drying strips of meat or smoking fish over a slow fire. The scent of smoke, the dry rustle of preserved leaves, the quiet confidence of knowing supplies were secured. These were the subtle comforts of ancient ingenuity, gently guiding you into a deep, enduring slumber, free from the immediate worries of the next meal, to acquire, prepare, and preserve their diverse meals. The Stone Age family relied on a sophisticated, albeit primal, array of tools. Imagine their hands not holding a smartphone or a fork, but grasping precisely crafted stones, bones, and wood, each implement serving a specific, vital purpose in their culinary endeavors. These weren't just simple rocks, gadgets of the prehistoric world, constantly evolving to make the challenging task of finding and preparing food more efficient, the most fundamental and enduring tool. Giving the era its very name was the stone tool. Early Stone Age tools, like the old down choppers, were incredibly basic. A pebble struck with another stone to create a sharp edge. These would have been used for tasks like breaking open bones to access marrow, or rough butchering of carcasses. Over millions of years, these tools became increasingly refined. The aculine hand axe, a teardrop-shaped biface, was a versatile all-purpose tool for chopping, scraping, and digging. Later, in the Middle and Upper Paleolithic, tool technology became much more specialized. Flint blades, precisely struck from a core, provided incredibly sharp edges for cutting meat, slicing plant fibers, and even butchering large game. Scrapers, often made from flint flakes, were used to clean hides and process plant materials. Burins, chisel-like tools, were used for engraving bone or antler, perhaps for making needles or points. A mainstream historical fact is that the progressive sophistication of stone tool technology across the Paleolithic period reflects a continuous process of innovation that directly impacted human dietary capabilities and efficiency in food acquisition and processing. Beyond stone, bone and antler were also vital materials. Points for spears were often made from sharpened bone or antler, providing strong, durable tips for hunting. Needles made from bone were crucial for sewing hides into clothing or creating rudimentary nets for fishing. Awls, pointed bone tools, could be used for piercing and working with leather. Imagine the meticulous process of shaping a deer antler into a lethal spear point, knowing your next meal depended on its effectiveness. Wood was equally indispensable, though less often preserved in the archaeological record. Digging sticks, sharpened branches used to unearth roots and tubers, were essential foraging tools. Spear shafts, obviously made from wood, were integral to hunting. Bowls, containers, and even rudimentary fishing traps could be fashioned from wood. The knowledge of which types of wood were strong, flexible, or heat-resistant was a critical skill passed down through generations. The development of specific tools directly impacted the diet. The invention of the Otlotlaw spear thrower, which we mentioned earlier, revolutionized hunting, allowing for more powerful and safer kills. The development of grinding stones, mortars, and pestles, or flat grinding slabs, allowed for the processing of wild grains and seeds into flour. This meant that previously tough for inedible plant parts could now be turned into nutrient-rich staples. It's like suddenly getting a food processor for your ancient kitchen. A quirky tidbit that showcases their early ingenuity. Some archaeological sites have revealed what appear to be prehistoric fishing weirs or traps, constructed from woven branches or stones in shallow riverbeds. These passive fishing devices would funnel fish into a collection area, providing a more reliable and less energy-intensive source of protein than active spearfishing. Imagine building a simple, elegant trap and letting the river bring dinner to you. Even the simple act of eating required tools. While hands were primary, sharpened flakes of stone could be used as knives for cutting portions of meat. Bones might serve as crude spoons or scraping tools. As technology advanced, the creation of specific cooking vessels, like heat-resistant baskets lined with clay, allowed for more sophisticated boiling and stewing. Historians still argue about the precise timeline and cultural diffusion of many of these tool innovations. Did different groups invent similar tools independently? Or did ideas spread rapidly across vast geographical distances through networks of exchange. What's clear is that the ingenuity of early humans in adapting and creating tools was a continuous process driven by the constant need for more efficient ways to acquire and process food. So, as you drift deeper into sleep, imagine the quiet industry of a stone-aged craftsman carefully chipping away at a piece of flint or patiently grinding seeds on a stone slab. The sharp click of stone on stone, the rhythmic crunch of grinding, the feel of a perfectly balanced spear. These were the sounds and sensations of their daily survival. Their ancient kitchen bustling with purpose, gently guiding you into a deep, restful slumber beyond the individual acquisition and preparation of food. The act of food sharing was absolutely fundamental to the survival and cohesion of any Stone Age family or band. Imagine the quiet understanding, the unspoken agreements as a freshly hunted animal was brought back to the camp. This wasn't just about individual sustenance. It was a deeply ingrained social contract, a powerful expression of community, and a vital strategy for collective survival. In a world without safety nets, sharing was the ultimate insurance policy. For hunter-gatherer societies, food resources were inherently unpredictable. A successful hunt might yield a massive amount of meat, far more than a single hunter or even a small family could consume before it spoiled. Conversely, a foraging expedition might be meager, or a hunting attempt could fail entirely. In such an environment, the strategy of risk pooling through sharing was paramount. If you had a successful hunt today, you shared your bounty with others. When their hunt was successful tomorrow, they would share with you. This reciprocal altruism ensured that even during individual failures, no one starved. It was the original communal fridge, always stocked, but without any actual refrigeration. A mainstream historical fact is that food sharing in hunter-gatherer societies was not merely an act of generosity, but a highly structured and socially enforced practice, driven by economic necessity. Anthropological studies of modern hunter-gatherer groups, who offer invaluable insights into prehistoric behaviors, consistently show complex rules governing who gets what portion of a kill, often based on kinship, contribution to the hunt, or social status. This wasn't a free-for-all. It was a carefully managed distribution system. The act of sharing also had profound social implications. It reinforced social bonds, strengthened kinship ties, and fostered a sense of collective identity. The evening meal, especially after a successful hunt, would have been a central communal event. Imagine the flickering firelight on faces, the low hum of conversation, the shared satisfaction of a well-learned meal, all deepening the connections within the group. It was the ultimate family dinner, where everyone truly contributed to the feast. Food sharing was also a way to teach and transmit knowledge across generations. Younger members would observe how food was distributed, learning the unwritten rules of their society. They would participate in the communal preparation, gaining skills from their elders. This continuous cycle of learning and contribution ensured the group's knowledge base, vital for survival, was constantly renewed. A quirky tidbit that demonstrates the meticulousness of ancient food sharing. Some archaeological evidence suggests that specific tools were developed not just for butchering, but for the precise division of meat. Cut marks on bones indicate careful portioning, reflecting the social rules for distribution. Imagine a Stone Age butcher meticulously carving up a deer, knowing exactly which piece goes to whom, down to the marrow bones. It points to a sophisticated understanding of fairness and social obligation beyond the immediate sharing of a kill or a gather. There was also a long-term element of reciprocity. Favors given were remembered, and favors received created an obligation to reciprocate in the future. This informal credit system, built on trust and mutual dependence, was crucial for sustaining the group over time through both good periods and lean ones. Historians still argue about the precise motivations behind extensive food sharing in early human societies. Was it primarily driven by pure altruism, by kin selection, sharing with genetic relatives to ensure gene survival, or by reciprocal altruism, the expectation of future repayment? It's likely a complex mix of all these factors, making human cooperation a truly fascinating evolutionary puzzle. The practice of food sharing meant that hunger, when it occurred, was often a collective experience rather than an individual one. While periods of famine certainly existed, the commitment to sharing meant that no single individual or small family unit would be left to starve if others had resources. It provided a powerful, albeit often unspoken, safety net in a world where survival was a constant, demanding struggle. So, as you drift deeper into the quiet, imagine the warmth of a communal fire, the quiet murmur of a prehistoric family sharing their evening meal, the profound sense of interdependence binding them together, the crackle of shared bones, the rustle of past berries, the deep satisfaction of knowing you belong. These were the primal sounds and feelings of a community surviving through sharing, gently guiding you into a deep, comforting slumber, just as the local environment shaped the types of food available, so too did vast geographical differences lead to incredibly diverse global diets during the Stone Age. Imagine trying to describe dinner to someone from another continent in the prehistoric era. Their concept of a meal would be utterly foreign to yours, defined by the unique ecosystems they inhabited. There was no universal Stone Age diet in the way we might think of it. Instead, It was a mosaic of highly specialized, regionally adapted culinary practices. Consider a Stone Age family living in the Arctic tundra of what is now Siberia or Alaska. Their diet would have been overwhelmingly reliant on animal protein and fat, as plant life is scarce for much of the year. They would have hunted large marine mammals like whales, seals, and walruses using specialized harpoons. Reindeer and caribou would have been crucial terrestrial prey. Their food preservation methods would focus on freezing and drying. Imagine a meal of blubber, dried caribou meat, and perhaps some lichen or berries gathered during the brief summer. It was a high-calorie, fat-rich diet necessary for survival in extreme cold. Now, shift your focus to a family in the tropical rainforests of Southeast Asia or the Amazon. Their diet would have been incredibly rich in plant diversity. They would have foraged for a vast array of fruit, some of which we still eat today. Many long extinct nuts, roots, and leafy greens. Hunting would focus on smaller game like monkeys, birds, and insects. And fishing would be a significant activity in rivers. Their cooking methods might include pit ovens or steaming with leaves. Imagine a meal of roasted plantains, exotic fruits, and perhaps some grilled fish wrapped in banana leaves. It was a nutrient-dense, high-fiber diet, often with a rapid cycle of consumption due to the quick spoilage in humid climates. A mainstream historical fact. The archaeological record. Through analysis of faunal animal and floral plant remains, as well as human skeletal remains, isotopic analysis provides clues about diet. Clearly demonstrates significant regional variations in Stone Age diets across the globe. These variations highlight the immense adaptability of Homo sapiens to virtually every terrestrial environment. This biological flexibility was a key factor in our species' ability to colonize the entire planet. Consider the coastal communities in regions like modern-day South Africa or Australia. Their diet would have been heavily focused on marine resources, an abundance of shellfish, as evidenced by massive shell middens, fish, crabs, and perhaps even smaller marine mammals. Seaweed and coastal plants would supplement their diet. Their tools would reflect this specialization, with bone harpoons and shell-opening tools being prominent. Imagine a beachside feast of freshly roasted oysters, steamed mussels, and perhaps some sweet wild roots gathered from the dunes. A quirky tidbit that reveals extreme regional adaptation. Some Stone Age groups in desert environments developed highly specialized knowledge of desert flora and fauna, often exploiting ephemeral water sources and seasonal blooms. They might extract water from specific roots or cacti and hunt agile desert animals. Imagine surviving in a landscape that seems utterly barren to us through an intimate ancestral knowledge of every hidden resource. It's a testament to human ingenuity in the harshest conditions. A group living in the European steppes would rely heavily on the vast herds of migratory animals like reindeer and horses. With a diet rich in meat and fat, a short distance away, a group in a more forested region might have a more balanced diet of forest game, nuts, and berries. Historians still argue about the extent to which these specialized regional diets led to distinct physiological adaptations in different human populations beyond just cultural practices. Did generations of high-fat, high-protein diets in the Arctic, for instance, lead to specific metabolic advantages? While certainly intriguing, the debate is complex and ongoing. So, as you drift deeper into sleep, imagine the vast tapestry of prehistoric landscapes, each offering its own unique bounty. The ice-covered plains with their herds of mammoths, the dense jungles teeming with fruits, the shimmering coastlines rich with seafood, a global dinner table, constantly shifting, always challenging, and utterly diverse. Let the echoes of these varied ancient meals lull you into a deep, multicultural slumber, far from the modern dilemma of what's for dinner. While the Stone Age is largely defined by the hunter-gatherer lifestyle, the seeds of a monumental shift were slowly, almost imperceptibly, being sown towards its later periods, the earliest hints of agriculture. Imagine a Stone Age family having always relied on the wild bounty of nature, beginning to experiment, to observe, and to subtly influence the growth of plants, moving tentatively towards a future where they would cultivate their own food. This wasn't a sudden revolution, but a slow, quiet transition, stretching over millennia, that would fundamentally reshape human dinner plates forever. This slow transition, known as the Neolithic Revolution, didn't happen overnight. It was a gradual process of observation, experimentation, and accumulated knowledge. Early humans, being keen observers of their environment, would have noticed that certain plants grew predictably in certain places after their seeds fell. They might have deliberately returned to these spots year, perhaps even scattering some seeds themselves or clearing away competing vegetation. This wasn't farming as we know it, but a gentle nudge, a subtle encouragement of nature's tendencies. The first evidence of these early agricultural hints often comes from the Fertile Crescent in the Near East around 10,000 to 8,000 BCE. Here, wild cereals like wheat and barley grew in abundance. Hunter-gatherers in this region might have begun to harvest these grains more intensively, developing specialized tools like sickles with flint blades to efficiently cut the stalks. The presence of grinding stones as we discussed, also suggests the processing of these wild grains for food. A historical fact is that this shift was initially characterized by broad-spectrum foraging, where people exploited an even wider range of resources, including wild cereals and small animals, before fully committing to settled agriculture. This period saw increased sedentism, living in one place for longer periods, which made it more practical to invest labor in cultivating plants and managing local animal populations. It was like going from being a nomadic foodie to a slightly more stationary gourmet. Slowly learning to garden. Early hints of agriculture also involved the slow process of domestication, both of plants and animals. Over generations, humans would select seeds from the most desirable plants, those with larger grains, or those that didn't scatter their seeds as easily. This unconscious, then conscious selection gradually led to changes in the plants themselves, making them more reliant on human cultivation. Similarly, certain wild animals like goats, sheep, and pigs might have been tamed or managed for their meat, milk, or wool, eventually leading to full domestication, a quirky tidbit that blurs the line between foraging and early agriculture. Some archaeological sites show evidence of pre-agricultural cultivation, where certain wild plants were intentionally protected, pruned, or encouraged to grow in specific areas, even if they weren't fully domesticated or planted in neat rows. It's like having a favorite wild berry patch that you secretly tend, making sure it stays productive for your family. This subtle intervention demonstrates a growing understanding of plant cycles and human agency in manipulating them. The transition to agriculture was driven by various factors, often debated by historians. Was it a response to population pressure, forcing people to find more efficient ways to produce food? Was it a response to climate change, which altered the availability of wild resources? Or was it a gradual accumulation of knowledge and a growing preference for a more settled lifestyle? Historians still argue whether population pressure or environmental changes were the primary drivers for the adoption of agriculture. It's a complex puzzle with no single, easy answer. The early experiments with cultivation would have been arduous. Clearing land, planting seeds, protecting crops from pests and animals, these were new, demanding tasks that required significant investment of time and labor. But the promise of a more predictable food supply, of being able to feed a larger population, was a powerful incentive. So, as you drift deeper into sleep, imagine the quiet shift in focus, the subtle human touch beginning to shape the wild landscape, the sound of early sickles harvesting wild grain, the slow steps towards domesticating a wild animal. the first tentative planting of a seed. These were the quiet, revolutionary beginnings that would change what was for dinner forever, gently guiding you into a deep, transformative slumber. Having explored the nuances of the Stone Age diet, from big game hunting to subtle agricultural hints, it's worth taking a moment to quietly address a modern phenomenon: the so-called paleo diet, reality, and how it often debunks modern myths about our ancient ancestors' eating habits. Imagine someone today telling you to eat exactly like a caveman, and then realizing that what they describe is often a highly simplified, sometimes inaccurate, version of a prehistoric meal. The modern paleo diet typically emphasizes lean meats, fish, fruits, vegetables, nuts, and seeds, while strictly excluding grains, legumes, dairy, refined sugar, and processed foods. The underlying premise is that humans are genetically adapted to eat only what our Stone Age ancestors ate, and that modern diseases stem from a dietary mismatch with our evolutionary past. While the intent might be noble, promoting healthier eating, the reality of the Stone Age diet was far more complex and varied than many popular interpretations suggest. A mainstream historical fact is that the actual Paleolithic diet was characterized by extreme dietary flexibility and regional variation, depending entirely on local ecosystems and seasonal availability. There was no single paleo diet that applied universally across millions of years and diverse global environments. A family in the Arctic ate vastly different foods than a family in the African savanna or a coastal community in Europe. Adaptability, not a rigid adherence to a narrow food list, was the true hallmark of Stone Age human survival. For example, while modern paleo diets often exclude grains, archaeological evidence increasingly shows that many Stone Age groups, particularly in the later Paleolithic, consumed and processed wild grains and seeds. Remember our quirky tidbit about grinding stones. These tools allowed for the consumption of diverse wild cereals, providing crucial carbohydrates. Similarly, while legumes are often excluded today, many wild beans and peas would have been available to ancient foragers, some of which require processing to be edible, but were certainly part of their varied plant intake. The emphasis on lean meat in modern paleo diets also doesn't fully align with ancient reality. Early humans would have consumed all parts of an animal, including nutrient-dense organ meats and bone marrow, which are rich in fat and essential nutrients. Fat was highly prized in the Stone Age for its caloric density, particularly in colder climates. The leanest cuts of meat, while providing protein, wouldn't have been the sole focus. It's like only eating chicken breast when the whole chicken is available, a luxury of choice that ancient humans couldn't afford. A quirky tidbit that further complicates the modern paleo narrative: archaeological analysis of human teeth from various Stone Age sites often shows evidence of wear patterns consistent with consuming tough, fibrous plant matter and grit from grinding stones. This suggests a diet that wasn't always perfectly cleaned and cooked and was often much rougher and more varied than the idealized clean paleo diet of today. Imagine chewing on a root that still has a bit of soil attached, not quite the pristine, organic produce section. Furthermore, the concept of processed food is also tricky in a Stone Age context. While they didn't have factories, they certainly processed their food. Drying, smoking, cooking, fermenting, though evidence for early fermentation is harder to find. And grinding were all forms of processing that made food more digestible, safer, or storable. They weren't just eating raw ingredients off the tree or from the carcass. Historians still argue about the true long-term health implications of the specific dietary shifts that occurred with the advent of agriculture. While the move to domesticated grains and dairy introduced new challenges, it also allowed for population growth and sedentary lifestyles that fundamentally shaped human civilization. The debate isn't whether modern processed foods are healthy, they generally aren't, but whether the simplistic return to paleo accurately reflects the complex and adaptable diets of our ancestors. So, as you drift deeper into sleep, let go of any rigid dietary notions. Imagine the true dietary flexibility of our Stone Age ancestors, adapting to every available resource, consuming a far broader and often tougher menu than many modern diets suggest. The real lesson from their plates isn't a strict food list, but a testament to human adaptability, ingenuity, and the sheer variety that nature has always offered. Let the echoes of their diverse, pragmatic meals lull you into a deep, flexible slumber. Beyond mere sustenance, the Stone Age family also perceived a profound connection between their food and their well-being, intuitively understanding how certain plants or animal parts could serve as ancient remedies, and elaborate medical texts where the forest, the river, and the fields were your pharmacopoeia. An ancestral knowledge guided the use of food not just for nutrition, but for healing. It was a holistic approach to health where dinner could literally be medicine. This understanding was deeply rooted in their intimate knowledge of the natural world. Through generations of observation and experimentation, early humans would have learned which plants had purgative effects, which could soothe a cough, or which might reduce inflammation. While not medicine in our modern scientific sense, these were practical applications of natural resources to alleviate suffering. It's like discovering that a particular berry not only tastes good, but also helps settle an upset stomach, a dual-purpose gift from nature. For example, various wild herbs and leafy greens consumed as food, would have provided essential vitamins and minerals that prevented deficiency diseases. A diet rich in wild plants would naturally have been high in fiber, aiding digestion. Certain plants might have been used specifically for their anti-inflammatory or antiseptic properties. Perhaps chewed or applied topically to wounds. A mainstream historical fact is that early human societies, through trial and error, developed an extensive practical knowledge understanding the medicinal properties of local plants, while our direct evidence from the Paleolithic is limited due to preservation issues. Archaeological findings of specific plant remains at ancient sites, coupled with ethnographic studies of modern hunter-gatherers, strongly suggest sophisticated plant use for both food and medicine. This knowledge was passed down orally, generation after generation, a vital part of survival wisdom. Animal products also played a role. Animal fats and bone marrow, highly prized for their caloric content, also provided essential nutrients like vitamins A and D, crucial for overall health and immunity. Some cultures today still consume specific organ meats for targeted health benefits, a practice likely rooted in ancient traditions. Even the simple act of consuming lean protein after a period of scarcity would be restorative. A quirky tidbit that hints at their unique remedies. There's some archaeological speculation that certain fungi might have been used not just for food, but for their medicinal properties. Some types of mushrooms have antimicrobial or anti-inflammatory compounds. Imagine a Stone Age healer carefully selecting a specific fungus from a tree, knowing its secret powers to soothe an ache or calm an infection. It adds a layer of quiet, mycological mystery to their ancient medical kit. The line between food and medicine would have been incredibly blurred. A nutritious meal itself was a preventative measure against illness. A particular herb added to a stew might be both for flavor and for its perceived therapeutic effect. The concept of separating food from drug is largely a modern invention. For them, it was all part of nature's bounty, to be used wisely for sustenance and well-being. Historians still argue about the true effectiveness of many of these ancient remedies. Some certainly had genuine pharmacological properties. Others might have relied more on psychological belief or cultural tradition. It's a fascinating challenge to sift through the archaeological and anthropological evidence to understand what genuinely worked and what served a more ritualistic or placebo function. So, as you drift deeper into sleep, imagine the Stone Age. Family not just eating to live, but living to eat wisely, drawing sustenance and healing from every corner of their natural world. The earthy scent of medicinal herbs, the warmth of a restorative broth, the quiet confidence in nature's pharmacy. These were the subtle, ancient connections between diet and health, gently guiding you into a deep, nourishing slumber, free from modern ailments, despite their incredible ingenuity in hunting, foraging, cooking, and preserving. The Stone Age family lived in a world dominated by the stark realities of feast and famine. Imagine a life constantly oscillating between periods of joyous abundance, when a large animal was successfully hunted or a patch of berries was ripe, and times of grueling scarcity where every calorie was a desperate struggle. There was no stable, predictable food supply, only the relentless, often brutal, cycles of nature's bounty and its harsh withdrawals. Periods of feast would be characterized by a flush of resources. This might follow a successful hunt of a large animal like a bison or a mammoth, providing hundreds of pounds of meat and fat. Or it could be the peak of a seasonal harvest, when wild fruits, nuts, or fish were incredibly plentiful. During these times, the Stone Age family would eat well, plenishing their energy reserves, and perhaps engaging in more communal gatherings and celebrations. This was a time for growing, for strengthening, and for a momentary relief from the constant pressure of hunger. The air might be thick with the smell of roasting meat and the sounds of satisfied chewing and quiet conversation around the fire. Conversely, famine was a constant, terrifying possibility. This could be triggered by numerous factors: a prolonged drought, killing off plants and driving away animals; a harsh winter, making foraging impossible and game scarce; or simply a long streak of unsuccessful hunts. During these lean periods, the Stone Age family would face severe hunger. Their bodies would adapt to conserve energy, metabolism would slow, and every effort would be focused on finding any available calorie, however meager. These were times of intense stress, where survival hung by a thread. A mainstream historical fact is that early human populations, particularly hunter-gatherers, experienced significant fluctuations in their nutritional intake, characterized by cycles of feast and famine, which differed markedly from the more stable but less diverse diets that would emerge with agriculture. This constant nutritional challenge likely drove many of the adaptations seen in early human metabolism and foraging strategies. It was a metabolic roller coaster, constantly adapting to too much or not enough. The unpredictability meant that even in times of feast, there was an underlying imperative to prepare for the inevitable lean times. This drove the development of food preservation techniques we discussed, like drying and smoking, to try and stretch the bounty of abundance into periods of scarcity. Every successful hunt or gather wasn't just for immediate consumption. It was also an investment in future survival, a quirky tidbit that reveals their desperate resourcefulness during famine. Archaeological evidence, including analysis of ancient human waste, sometimes show signs of consuming unusual or normally inedible items during periods of extreme hunger, such as tree bark, tough roots, or even parts of animals normally discarded. This indicates the desperate measures taken to survive when conventional food sources failed. Imagine being so hungry that the bark of a tree looks like a gourmet meal. It really puts our modern food choices into perspective. The cycles of feast and famine had profound social implications. Periods of abundance could foster larger, more cohesive groups, and perhaps even allow for the development of more complex social structures or artistic endeavors. Periods of famine, however, could lead to dispersion of groups, increased conflict over dwindling resources, and higher mortality rates. The ability to manage these cycles through sharing and foresight was a crucial test of a group's resilience and adaptability. Historians still argue about the frequency and severity of famine events in the Paleolithic period, while some scholars emphasize the relative stability and abundance of well-adapted hunter-gatherer diets. Others point to the inherent risks and environmental pressures that could lead to widespread hunger. The truth likely lies in regional variation and the specific environmental challenges faced by different groups. So, as you drift deeper into sleep, imagine the ebb and flow of ancient life. The joyous anticipation of a successful hunt giving way to the quiet gnawing of hunger, and then back again to the warmth of a shared meal, the rustle of a full stomach, the anxious rumble of an empty one. These were the profound rhythms of survival, dictated by nature's unpredictable hand. Let the echoes of these ancient cycles gently lull you into a deep, uninterrupted slumber, far from the concerns of tomorrow's meal. Asterisk, as our journey through the culinary landscapes of the Stone Age concludes, we are left with a profound sense of connection to our distant ancestors, an understanding that stretches far beyond the mere ingredients on their plates. The echoes of their Last Supper, consumed around a flickering fire, resonate with our own most fundamental human experiences. Imagine the quiet satisfaction, the primal sense of security that came with a full stomach after a day of arduous effort. This feeling, this deep, ancient comfort, connects us all across tens of thousands of years. The Stone Age family, with their diverse hunter-gatherer diet, their ingenious tools, and their remarkable resilience in the face of feast and famine, represents the foundational chapter of human eating. They were the ultimate adaptive eaters, learning to thrive in almost every corner of the planet by intimately understanding their environment and constantly innovating. Their plate, ever changing with the seasons and the landscape, was a testament to human ingenuity and the power of cooperation. Think about the sheer knowledge required for their daily survival. Not just knowing what was edible, but where to find it, when it was in season, how to process it to remove toxins, and how to cook it to maximize its nutritional value. This wasn't learned from books. It was passed down through generations, through observation, storytelling, and direct participation. It was a living, breathing encyclopedia of ecological wisdom, a quirky reflection of their pragmatic approach to food, while they didn't have Michelin stars. The focus was entirely on utility and survival. Taste was certainly a factor, but secondary to nutrition and safety. Every part of an animal was used, every edible plant maximized. There was no room for waste, no concept of picky eating. It reminds us of a simpler time when food was solely about sustenance, without the endless choices and complexities of modern diets. The communal aspect of their meals, particularly after a successful hunt, highlights the deep social bonds that food fostered. Sharing wasn't just practical, it was a ritual that reinforced community, trust, and mutual dependence. The fire, the shared meal, the gathering of the family or band, these were the primal origins of human society, built around the fundamental act of breaking bread or roasting meat. Together, historians still argue about the precise impact of specific dietary components on early human evolution, particularly the role of meat protein versus diverse plant carbohydrates in brain development. The debate is complex, but what's clear is that the incredible adaptability of the human diet was a key factor in our species' global success and continued evolution, as the scent of ancient wood smoke and the distant calls of prehistoric animals fade into the quiet of your room. Allow yourself to feel this profound, quiet connection to our earliest ancestors. The sound of tools at work, the crackle of a cooking fire, the contented murmurs of a family gathered for dinner. These were the rhythms of their daily lives, the essence of their survival. Your own thoughts are now growing lighter, softer. The images of ancient foraging and powerful hunts are dissolving, replaced by the comforting darkness. Your breathing is deepening, becoming a slow, rhythmic hush. Every muscle is relaxing, every thought drifting away like a leaf on a slow-moving stream. There's nothing left to do now but let go, to surrender to the warmth of your covers and the stillness of the air around you. Just quiet now, peaceful,